Now remember, Carroll Quigley was the historian and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And Carroll Quigley was all for whatever they did. Now remember, the Council on Foreign Relations works with its daddy in Britain, which is the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Remember, it's the Royal Institute for International Affairs. If you're all thinking it's just like another communist organization, it's got a royal charter to exist. It's above government, you might say. And it says here in Tragedy and Hope, on page 1263, it says, behind this protective barrier, a new teenage culture has grown up. This is in the 60s he's talking about. Its chief characteristic is rejection of parental values and of middle-class culture. What a coincidence, eh? It's all coincidences we're reading here. In many ways, this new culture was like that of the African tribes. Its tastes in music and the dance, its emphasis on sex play, its increasingly scanty clothing, its emphasis on group solidarity, the high value it puts on interpersonal relations, especially talking and social drinking, and drug taking, I should add to it. It's almost total rejection of future preference and constant efforts to free itself. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, we're back, cutting through the matrix, just tying a few things together to show people that nothing happens by itself. Nothing in any major scale happens by itself. It takes coordination of various sciences. It takes cooperation definitely of big academia. It takes cooperation between the entertainment industry and popular television and so on, all to all work together to cause cultural changes in society. And we're influenced more by fiction than we are by anything else, believe it or not. Fiction really, it's like monkey see, monkey do. Plato said the same thing about drama on the stage in ancient Greece. So it says here, here's Carroll Quigley talking about, and remember he was for this agenda, he worked for this agenda, and he was a professor himself, and he thought it was just swell that it seemed to be going to plan. And he's talking about how the children suddenly, and it was a sudden thing, how they rejected the old values suddenly, because it was the trendy thing to do, obviously. And they were copying the culture like that of the African tribes. Now I can remember reading about ways that the communists could possibly do this, and they were going into things like dance. And if they could break all the old traditional dances, which actually required you to hold the partner, no kidding, that's how it used to be. Amazing, eh? Used to hold the person, since that was the whole point of it. And then suddenly they're dancing apart, staring at each other's knees. But they brought that in very successfully, but they copied it from African dancing, basically. And they also used the beat as well to try and bring on the sexual stimulation of the African tribal dances as well. And so they used, as I say, anthropologists big time in the culture industry at this particular period. Getting back to the book, though, it says here, they started to put dressing in scanty clothing, the heavy emphasis on sex play, emphasis on group solidarity. We're all together. We're a different species from the old species. Basically, that's what they thought, you know. And they're told by the communists in America, don't trust anybody over 30. So don't listen to them, in fact, over 30. And then it says here, and the high value it puts on interpersonal relations, especially talking and social drinking. It's almost total rejection of future preference and its constant efforts to free itself from the tyranny of time. They were always stoned, so they could never turn up for anything. Teenage solidarity and sociality, especially the solidarity of their groups and subgroups, are amazingly African in attitudes as they gather at nightly or at least on weekends to drink cokes, talk, intermingle interminably in the midst of throbbing music, preferably in semi-darkness with couples drifting off for sex play in the corners as a kind of social diversion and a complete emancipation from time. Usually they have their own language. That was all given to them too. They didn't know that, of course, with vocabulary and constructions so strange that parents find them almost incomprehensible. This Africanization of American society is gradually spreading with the passing years to higher age levels in our culture and is having profound and damaging effects on the transfer of middle-class values to the rising generation. A myriad of symbolic acts over the last 20 years have served to demonstrate the solidarity of teen culture and its rejection of middle-class values. Many of these involve dress and dating customs, both major issues in the adolescent parental Cold War. Interesting term, eh? Adolescent parental Cold War. The jive language of the period also had a South Chicago origin and has been traced back to a large extent to a saloon run by a certain local oracle called Hip early in the 20th century. Fortunately, going steady was only a brief, if drastic, challenge to potential attitudes and was soon replaced by tribal gregariousness and tolerant sexual broad-mindedness, which might be called clique-going. Since it involved social solidarity, sometimes sexual promiscuity within a small group, usually of 10 or less, this became to their adults the teenage gang, which still strives or thrives, but never in a very formal way in middle-class circles as it does in lower-class ones. Two casualties of this process are sexual jealousy and sexual privacy, both of which have largely disappeared amongst many upper-middle-class young people. Now, that's what the communists said too. They do away with jealousy and so on, and you would have no steady partner. Back with more after this.